Good afternoon, everyone. We are back for day 4 of the Robert Tellis trial. Unfortunately, hey Bernard, hey Miss Carol, how are you all doing today? Glad you could join me. Unfortunately, I don't have my wife here with me today, so if there are some technical difficulties, like if my microphone's not working, which has happened in the past, I'm gonna have to rely on you all to let me know that that is the case. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep on going as if nothing has happened. So I'd appreciate if you all would keep me informed if I do have some technical difficulties. Again, we are on day 4 of the Robert Tellis murder trial. And hey, Jeff, good to see you here. And hopefully we'll get to see Robert Tellis take the stand. I don't know if the defense is going to be able to start today. We should be going into witness number 25 for the prosecution if they have any more witnesses. Uh, and at some point here in the near future, the defense should take over. I expect them to take over this week. And if they do take over today, we will probably be done by Friday. And depending on how long the jury deliberates, we should have a verdict here by the end of the week or perhaps early next week. I hope that the jury does not have to deliberate over the weekend. We never like to see that because that means they typically are going to go home for the weekend and are more susceptible to outside influence at that point. So we don't like to see that, but it could happen here. Just a forewarning, tomorrow, as you all know, I am a practicing attorney. So, and YouTube don't pay the bills. So I got some bills to pay, meaning I got some work to do. So I'm going to get started a little late tomorrow. I will probably not be available until sometime after 3 o'clock. So I am going to go live at 3 and I will begin day 5 at 3 o'clock. So we won't be caught up with the court. I do hope that you all will still join me so that we can watch it together, especially if we get to watch Robert Tellis on the stand together, because that is what we are here for. That's what I'm here for. Again, the reason that I'm doing this particular live is because Robert Tellis is an attorney and he's on trial and he said he's going to take the stand. So I thought this would be an interesting case from a legal perspective. Even though it might not be the most interesting testimony, it might not be the most lively testimony any of you have ever seen before. But I am looking forward to that particular part of this trial. So if we do see this individual take the stand today or tomorrow or anytime this week, I think he's going to bury himself further into the hole that has already been created for him or dug for him by the prosecution, and more so by his alleged actions. It does look like the court is about to begin here pretty soon. We've got the seal of the great data up on the court TV screen, and that usually means that there is some activity in the courtroom. So I'm going to take us to that so that we don't miss anything. But I did get a pretty good question over the weekend that I answered. I don't know if you all had a time to look in the chat, but somebody asked whether they have surprise witnesses. And the answer to that question is nuanced. So like an attorney, I'm not going to say yes or no. Give you a real attorney-like answer here. So in a trial, somewhere during the trial, usually somewhere toward the beginning of a case, I'm sorry, not of a trial, the judge puts out a scheduling order. The scheduling order says trial is going to be on this date sometime in the future, and therefore this is due on this date, and this is due before that on this date, and this is due before that on this date. And one of those dates that the judge puts is the exchange of witness lists. Now, the exchange of witness lists is done far enough in advance so that each side can depose the other side's witnesses. That does become the witness list for trial. However, in deposing witnesses, sometimes you are able to identify other witnesses who may have evidence, in which case you would just either have an agreement with the other party to amend your witness list, or you would petition the judge in the absence of an agreement to amend your witness list and tell the judge, here's why I need to amend my witness list. And as long as you either have agreement or authority from the judge to amend your witness list, you can change your witness list up to at any point up to trial. It's very rare that you'll see the judge allow someone to amend their witness list during trial because we don't like surprise witnesses. However, in criminal actions, there's a couple things that must be taken into consideration. One is that the constitutional rights of the defendant are at play in a criminal trial, meaning the court has to be sure that the court is protecting the defendant's constitutional rights. And part of that is being able to call the witnesses that the defendant says are necessary to defend himself. So the defendant is given far more leeway in a criminal trial to amend their witness list, even during trial. When that does happen, however, the judge will typically allow the amendment, allow the witness to take the stand, but before the witness is allowed to take the stand, she carves out time for the other side to depose that witness so that that side can gain an understanding of what the witness is going to testify to and how they can possibly counter that testimony. In this particular trial, remember, we had that First Amendment issue. You're welcome, Jeff. Jeff was the one that asked that question, everybody. We had that First Amendment issue in this trial where the state wanted full access to the decedent's computers and other electronic equipment in order to pull any information from the decedent's journalistic investigation into Mr. Tellis and perhaps find witnesses there. The decedent's employer said, no, you can't do that because all of this is behind a cloak of privilege provided by the First Amendment. So first, you have to let us go through everything, cull out the privileged information, and give you everything else. The state said, no, I don't want to do that. And so that ended up before the Nevada Supreme Court. The Nevada Supreme Court decided that issue on the side of the newspaper. And because of the delay there, it wasn't until the first day of trial that the prosecution and the defense got access to that information, that non-privileged information that was contained on the decedent's computer. So there could have been potential witnesses identified in that information that they obtained the first day of trial that they didn't know about beforehand. And so it's much more likely that in this case, the judge will allow either side to amend their witness list during trial based on that information that they gained the first day of trial. But again, if either side does that, then the judge will likely give the other side the opportunity to depose that witness. And that's probably something that both sides are going to want to do, depose those potential witnesses before they tell the court, hey, we want this person to take the stand. Nobody wants a potential witness to take the stand without ever having heard anything that they're going to say when they do take the stand, because nobody wants any surprises to be heard by the jury. No surprise testimony to be heard by the jury. Hey, Natalie, good to see you here. Um, so that's where we are in this case. That's where we are with respect to the witnesses. I thought going into this that one side had 20. I read somewhere that one side had 20 witnesses and the other side had 14. I'm sorry, 15. But it appears that either that information was incorrect or the witness lists have already been amended, because we are now on, if the prosecution is still going, we are going to be hearing from witness number 25 for the prosecution today. Excuse me. And so far, the defense is apparently sticking to its theory that all of this was staged, all of this is a conspiracy, and that this Compass Realty Group and the police department are somehow in cahoots to try to frame Mr. Tellis for this particular crime. And so they've targeted their cross-examination of the prosecution's witness toward kind of establishing that conspiracy theory. And I don't know that they've done the best possible job. They did make some gains early in the trial with respect to kind of perhaps casting reasonable doubt. They talked about how much blood was at the scene of the crime and the fact that all of the evidence that was allegedly taken from Mr. Tellis's home had none of the decedent's blood on it. In an effort to basically say, look, all of this stuff was planted. None of this actually belonged to Mr. Tellis. But then the prosecution kind of refuted that none of this belonged to Mr. Tellis when they had their expert witnesses take the stand from the Las Vegas Police Department crime lab, who essentially testified that the shoes and the hat have Robert Tellis's DNA on them. The inside lining of the hat has Robert Tellis's DNA, and the shoes, both of them have Robert Tellis's DNA, both on the interior and the exterior of them. So the idea that it wasn't Mr. Tellis who was wearing these things at some point is kind of debunked by that particular DNA evidence. Not only that, but the prosecution has done a great job of establishing the cleanliness of the crime scene with respect to a evidence preservation standpoint. They roped off the scene. They didn't allow people there. They did the same thing when they were searching Mr. Tellis's home. They had a patrol officer at the door limiting traffic. Nobody has placed anybody from Compass Realty anywhere near either of these scenes, either at Mr. Tellis's house or at the decedent's home. Nobody has placed Mr. Jappy inside of Mr. Tellis's home or at the crime scene at the decedent's home. Mr. Jappy is, of course, the Las Vegas police officer who is allegedly involved in this conspiracy between the police department and Compass Realty. And he's allegedly involved because he was, at Mr. Tellis's behest, investigating improper action at the public administrator's office. And then he began investigating Tellis instead. And so the defense is kind of taking that change in the investigation and then coupled with Mr. Tellis being arrested for this crime to demonstrate, I guess, that Mr. Jappy is involved somehow in a conspiracy to frame Mr. Tellis. But Detective Jappy did show up at the arrest of Mr. Tellis, even though he is not a homicide detective. But Mr. Jappy kind of explained all of that away by saying, look, I already had a rapport with the defendant because I had had these conversations with the defendant regarding this investigation that he wanted me to become a part of. I had also, talked to him without telling him that he was being investigated. I was talking to him to kind of glean information from him when I realized that he was the subject of an investigation. You see, he said, so it only made sense when we were trying to get Mr. Tullis to exit his home for a police officer who already had a rapport with Mr. Tullis to be the one to try to get him to exit his home. And that's also what I do. When people are on the ledge, I talk them down. I've been doing that for years I'm part of the team that talks them down. I've been doing that for years for the Las Vegas Police Department. And in this particular instance, soon into my conversation with Mr. Tullis, who I had a rapport with, we realized that he was, potentially going to harm himself or potentially harming himself. And so this became a situation in which my services were needed, or at least someone from a member of my team. And since I was already talking to him, well, it only made sense for me to continue the conversation to try to encourage Mr. Tullis not to harm himself and to surrender himself to the police department. Come to find out, Mr. Tullis ended up becoming stuck in his bathtub, and the SWAT team had to utilize robots and drones to find the defendant and ensure everyone's safety as they effectuated this arrest. But at no point did Mr. Jappy enter the home. He didn't participate in the arrest, although he did, as the defense attorney pointed out in opening statements, he did ride in the ambulance with Mr. Tullis to the hospital. But while that may look bad, he testified that, yes, I was in the ambulance along with firefighters and paramedics and essentially a bunch of people who were ensuring the safety of the defendant. So it's reasonable, I'll say, for Detective Jappy, who is trained to talk people out of harming themselves, to be in the ambulance with the defendant who said he's going to harm himself as they ride to the hospital. Miss Carol has a question. If an attorney is representing someone and they admit to the attorney they're guilty, does the attorney continue? This is another one of those questions that I'm going to give a lawyer answer to. So I'm going to rewrite your question, Miss Carol. Guilt and non-guilt are legal terms, meaning there are specific crimes with which Mr. Tullis is being charged, and there are elements to those crimes. An ordinary person, a non-attorney, can't necessarily say, I am guilty of this crime, because they don't understand necessarily all of the elements of the crime and what the prosecution would have to prove in order to demonstrate that this person is guilty of that particular crime. That said, if you're on trial for murder and you tell your defense attorney, I killed that guy, the defense attorney still has an obligation to defend you in that action. Because even if you killed that guy, there are certain defenses that you have, and the attorney has to ensure that the prosecution has the evidence necessary to convict you of having killed that guy. It's not you've I'm sure heard the saying, it's not about what you know, it's about what you can prove. The same goes for the prosecution. For a whole lot of people, prosecution knows who did it. The police department knows who did it. They just don't have the evidence to be able to prove it. So you never get a case. You never get a trial of the person that they're 99% sure committed this crime. Once a person is on trial for a crime, their defense attorney has to assume the prosecution still doesn't have the evidence necessary, and or there are defenses that I can bring up that will exonerate my client. For instance, here in the state of Florida, playing with the stand your ground law in a court of law will often mean somebody who kills somebody doesn't get prosecuted for killing that person. In that instance, the defendant would necessarily tell their attorney, I killed that guy, right? So there are instances, however, where a defense attorney can, because of a moral objection, it's morally reprehensible to that defense attorney to continue defending their client, where they can petition the court to be removed from the case. The court does not have to allow that person to remove themselves from the case, though. So it's up to the court. The earlier in the case that request is asked, the better the chances that the defense attorney can get off the case. The closer to trial you are, the worse your chances. There are also other ways to try to get removed from a case. You can just we have a duty to zealously advocate on behalf of our client. We have a duty to attempt to cooperate with our client, but we don't necessarily have a duty to get along with our client. And while we have to cooperate, we don't have to put aside our feelings as to the type of person that we're dealing with. And sometimes acting a different way toward your client may encourage your client to get rid of you. And there's absolutely nothing the court can do about your client firing you. So that is one way that you can kind of massage the system in order to get off of a case. But in law school, we are taught about a real life example. Most law students are taught about this particular case, and I'm probably going to get some of the details wrong because it's been a long time, Miss Carol. But there were two attorneys in a law firm, and their client was on trial for murder. I'm sorry, their client was on trial for murder. There was another person who was on trial for a different murder. Their client told them where the body of the decedent in that other case was, where he had buried it, exactly where. These two defense attorneys went to the place that their client told him he had buried the body in that other case, found the body, covered it back up, went home. They both wrote statements saying everything that had happened up to that point. They both signed it, and they put it in a safe. They put those writings in a safe because somebody was on trial for a murder that their client committed. That person that was on trial for that murder went to prison. And those attorneys could say absolutely nothing. Eventually, their client died. And when their client died, they opened up the safe and took the papers to the powers that be. And the person who had been in prison for the murder of that individual was released based on the information that they gave to the powers that be. I say that to say those people continued representing their client, even though they knew he had killed this other person and very likely killed the person that he was on trial for having killed. They continued to represent him because they had an obligation to do so. So again, what earlier in one of these lives, I told you that I could never be a criminal attorney, and that case is one of the reasons why. I wouldn't have been able to do that. I'd have just lost my license, and that would have been the end of it. I would not continue to be an attorney at that point because I'd be snitching. I would not want that person to go to prison. I would not want his entire life disrupted because my client did something that my client should not have done. And I have some obligation to the bar of the state to not tell on my client. I'm not built like that. So yeah, I just wouldn't be an attorney anymore because they take my license away real quick. So that's that. Well, that wasn't really directly in response to your question, but a kind of similar situation. But if in this particular instance, if Robert Tullis were to tell his attorney that he killed this guy, I will say this: his attorney can no longer deceive the court by putting forth a conspiracy theory as if all of this evidence was planted and that someone else had committed this particular crime. He still has a duty of candor to the tribunal, and he can't put forth arguments that he knows to be either factually or legally incorrect. So Robert Tullis, if this attorney is of upstanding moral character, and if he holds to his duties to the bar of his state, if he holds to his professional responsibilities, Robert Tullis cannot have told him at this point that Robert Tullis committed this crime, because otherwise we wouldn't see the defensive efforts that we're seeing to try to point toward a conspiracy. He would have to defend this action in some other way. Natalie has a question. How long have you been practicing? Where are you licensed? And do you litigate? So I have been practicing here in the great state of Florida for, it will be 11 years in, I believe, next month. I don't know. I'm getting old, so I don't remember the exact month, but it was in 2013 that I became licensed to practice in the state of Florida. I graduated from law school in 2012. I was already 30 plus years old at that point. So you do the math. And so I came to this attorney thing a little late. I'm also licensed, in addition to Florida, where I'm licensed obviously throughout the state. I'm also licensed to litigate before the Southern, Middle, and Northern District, federal district courts in Florida. And I'm also licensed in DC, which only essentially has, for all intents and purposes, federal court. For those who don't know, DC is governed by federal law. So yeah, there's that. They have city administration and stuff like that, but it's governed by federal law. So there's a federal court in DC that I'm licensed to sit before. And yes, I do litigate. I started with litigating employee non-compete agreements, trade secret cases, essentially employment restrictive covenants, trade secrets, and general business contractual disputes. At some point, I went out on my own. I want to say that was 7 years ago. And I began litigating other types of cases, including personal injury and things of that nature. Mostly because when you put out your own shingle, you kind of got to take whatever comes in the door for a little while. Since then, I've stopped doing personal injury litigation. I focus on representing businesses through an kind of an outside general counsel relationship and litigating on their behalf. Usually that litigation involves contract disputes. But right now I'm dealing with a business divorce that could turn ugly. So I would also likely litigate that particular business divorce should it turn ugly. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I do pretty much all contract disputes. Some of my clients sign contracts without telling me, and that's usually when we end up in court because they don't give me the opportunity to review those contracts. And then I have other clients who give me everything, and those clients typically don't end up in court. So I kind of have a good enough mix where some clients give me and provide enough business on the front end to avoid them ending up in litigation, and some clients don't want to pay for the work on the front end and end up paying me a whole lot more to litigate. So yeah, that's what I do. So I don't do any criminal law. But sometimes my litigation flirts with criminal law. If you can find that somebody violated law when committing, especially in the personal injury context, if they violated the law in the commission of their negligence, then if you can demonstrate that to the court, then you can get what's called evidence of negligence instructions. Basically, if you are going 900 miles an hour on the freeway and I prove you are going 900 miles an hour on the freeway and you run into somebody, now we have an evidence of negligence instruction because I demonstrated that to the court. The court now tells the jury, look, this dude was driving 900 miles an hour on the freeway, and you can use that fact alone to determine that this person was negligent. So that's one of the ways that like criminal law can kind of mix in there. And if, let's say, Mr. Tullis were convicted here, then Mr. Gehrman's family can use the conviction in this case to bring a civil action against Mr. Tullis, and they already have that kind of working in their favor. The same is not true in reverse. So like if I were to win a personal injury action and prove that someone was negligent, a criminal court can't use the fact that I proved that they were negligent to say, okay, they must have been driving 900 miles an hour. But it does work my way. It just doesn't work for the state. So I don't know what's going on. The court is taking an extra long amount of time. Perhaps that means that we are going to see the defense call their first witness today. Perhaps they are doing some motion practice. So I'm not familiar with the motion practice that goes on when the prosecution rests and the defense takes over because I don't do criminal law. But in civil cases, when the plaintiff rests, the person who has to prove everything rests, the defense gets to get up and say, Your Honor, here's everything that they had to prove in order to win here. And they've only offered evidence of this, and this, and they missed the fourth element. Therefore, we win. Tell them we win. Let's all go home. In the civil context, those, unless it's just really clear, we usually don't win those. Another potential motion is, look, they gave this evidence, but no jury in their right mind could believe them. So you should just let us win and let's all go home. Again, those don't usually win. The court usually either denies them or does what's called reserves ruling on them. The reason that they reserve ruling, even if they are inclined to grant those motions, is so that we can get to the end of the case, let the jury make its determination, and then if the judge wants to say, but no jury in their right mind could have believed this, so I'm tossing all this out, somebody's going to appeal that decision, and at least you'll have the jury verdict already on paper. So we don't all have to come back and have this whole show all over again. So the judges typically like to let the jury make their decision before the judge makes any decision as to whether or not somebody did something so egregious as to, or failed to present evidence or something like that, so as to terminate the litigation prematurely. So I would imagine that there's something similar in the criminal context. I'm not 100% sure because, again, we have constitutional issues at play in the criminal context that I don't really have to deal with in a civil context. And some of those constitutional issues have a monumental impact on the inner workings of criminal court and criminal trials. So that could be what we're doing. We also could just be waiting for a jury to show up. We also could be waiting for the judge to take the bench. We could be waiting for the defendant to get there. There may have been some issue getting him from prison into his chair. There could be any number of reasons why the court is so late. We're now 30 minutes into this and we got nothing going. I also have no sound. So sometimes I can hear murmuring that you all may not be able to hear in the court, but they have not even turned on the microphones apparently as of yet. So while we wait, does anybody else have any additional questions that I might be able to answer for you? Miss Carroll says, just an observation, but if the lady behind Mr. Tellis is his wife, she was texting someone constantly. So I don't think that's his wife. I do have a picture of his wife somewhere, and I don't think that's her. If I had to guess, that is probably a reporter. And she's likely there to, figure out, to take statements back to her news outlet. And she's probably sitting directly behind Mr. Tellis so that she can get an inside view of things that they're writing, saying things that they're looking at on their computer, things like that, even though she may not report on them. It may give her insight into how she should report. So this is Mr. Tellis's family. And the taller person, other than Mr. Tellis, that is his wife. And I don't think that's her. She looks markedly different. So unless she's had some work done since this picture was taken, I doubt that's her. But that loving family that we just saw in that picture could be one of the reasons that Mr. Tellis allegedly committed this crime because start tryst of sorts with one of the witnesses that we saw, and that would be a married woman by the name of Roberta Lee Kennett, and this is her and her husband. That has not been proven. Again, that is alleged, but if information did get out that Mr. Tellis was having a extramarital affair with Miss Lee Kennett, then that could provide motive for this particular crime. Bernard, I don't envy any of these people either.
Does the state stipulate to the presence of a jury panel?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you may call your next witness.
State calls Taylor Oliver.
So we are still, the state is still calling witnesses. So who knows how many witnesses they have at this point. I don't see Mrs. Tellis anywhere in the audience.
Please watch your step. And if you'll remain standing, raise your right hand and face the clerk.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Taylor Tolliver, Taylortolliver.
May I proceed? Good morning, Ms. Tolliver. How
Good
are you
morning.
employed?
I'm a detective with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
How long have you worked for Metro?
It'll be 10 years next month.
Okay. How were you assigned back in 2022?
I am criminal intelligence detective,
And what were your job duties back in 2022, say September?
an undercover surveillance detective.
And as an undercover surveillance detective back then, I think we all have a general idea of what that might look like, but can you tell the members of the jury what you did day to day as that type of detective?
Essentially, we would just utilize different equipment and tactics to essentially surveil people, follow them around, observe their activities. Sometimes they would be individuals, sometimes they would be businesses, dependent on what the investigators requested.
And the investigators, when they made a request of surveillance, do they explain their whole case to you, or do they just say, look, I need surveillance on this particular person on this date, or how does that work?
They typically give us objectives and then enough context from their investigation for those objectives, but not in detail their entirety of their cases.
Okay, so just sort of a framework so you can accomplish the objective on the surveillance?
Correct.
Okay. During September of 2022, did you conduct surveillance on behalf of, or at the request of, I should say, Detective Derek Jaffe?
Yes.
And was one of the days that you conducted surveillance September the 1st of 2022?
Yes.
Do you remember if that location was like a neighborhood on a street called Spanish Steps?
Yes.
Who was the target? Who were you watching on that day?
Robert Tellis.
And do you see Mr. Tellis in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you point to him and describe what he's wearing today, please?
A black suit with a multicolored tie.
Your Honor, may the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant? When you were conducting your surveillance on September the 1st, were you in a vehicle or were you on foot, or what kind of?
Predominantly in a vehicle.
Okay, and as part of the surveillance, do you keep a log of activities that you observed on September the 1st?
Yes.
And then based on that log, is that later transferred to the detective?
Yes.
In addition to keeping a written log, do you also sometimes take photographs?
I do.
And on that day, did you take some photographs?
Yes.
And that would be him and at his residence doing whatever.
Yes,
Okay. With regard to the photographs, are those given to the requesting detective as well?
they are.
And then all of that is sort of kept in a Metro file?
I'm not really sure what he would do with it. They're forwarded to the case agent.
After you give it to the case agent, you're kind of done?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Thank you. Having shown defense counsel what's been marked as states 348 through 350, just ask you to look through these photographs and let me know when you're done, please. Having looked at those photographs, do they fairly and accurately depict what you saw on September the 1st?
They do.
State moves to admit 348 through 350.
No objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm gonna, may I publish? I'm gonna put on the overhead what's been admitted as states 348. Let me just. Can you see that on your screen up there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What are we looking at in that photograph?
The vehicle of Robert Tellez, or the vehicle he operated that day?
Okay. And is it parked basically in front of his house on Spanish Steps?
Yes.
This is states 349. And what are we looking at in that photo?
That is Mr. Tellez exiting the vehicle.
And last one is states 350. Another shot of Mr. Tellez.
It appears to be immediately after him exiting the vehicle, walking towards the residence.
Thank you very much. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Tolliver, so I understand your testimony correctly. Mr. Tellez was under surveillance by yourself at the request of Detective Jappy on September 1st, 2022.
By myself and my squad, yes.
Photographed him, watched him, correct?
Yes.
You'll agree with me that there were no actions on his part that would raise any suspicions in your mind concerning crimes that may or may not be occurring?
I don't deem what is suspicious. I make the observations and forward them to the detective they requested it.
Did he leave the residence multiple times, a single time? Please explain to us a little more in detail what you observed on the events of September 1st, 2022.
Specifically the first?
Correct.
I believe on that day he left to Target, if I'm correct. And then I believe he also went to pick up a juvenile from a bus stop.
Okay, a child. The child that he picked up, he returned home to his residence.
Correct.
Fair to say?
Yes.
Were you involved in the surveillance of Mr. Tellez on September 6th?
Yes.
And if you could explain to us what it was that you saw occur on September 6th? Have you reviewed your report in preparation for your testimony today?
I have, but we did a couple surveillances on Mr. Tellez. Oh, I do remember, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So that was the day I don't believe he initially left the house. The day he exited his residence and began cleaning the exterior of his vehicles.
Okay, and just so we're clear, you surveilled him washing 3 vehicles, correct?
Correct.
And do you recall what 3 vehicles those were?
There was the vehicle that was just depicted, I believe a BMW, a Tesla, and then a Yukon.
Okay. You surveilled him washing the exterior of the 3 vehicles, correct?
Correct.
And this washing of the 3 vehicles took about 2.5 hours, correct?
I believe so, yes.
At no time did you see him enter and wash any of the 3 vehicles, correct?
That's incorrect. I did see him enter a vehicle.
But to wash, you saw him, when you saw him enter the vehicle, it was to move the vehicle, correct?
No, I saw him enter a vehicle that he did not move.
Okay, and what vehicle was that?
The Yukon.
And what specifically did you see him do inside the
I
vehicle?
can't say what he did within the vehicle. My vantage point didn't allow me to see that.
He was in the vehicle briefly.
Correct.
You saw him exit the residence prior to washing the 3 vehicles with cleaning agents, correct?
Yes.
And he used those cleaning agents to wash the BMW, correct?
Yes.
The Tesla
Yes.
and the Yukon, the Denali, correct?
Yes.
But he washed the exteriors only, correct?
As far as what my vantage point gave me, I saw him watch the exteriors of the 3 vehicles you just mentioned, yes.
Okay, and nothing else, just the exteriors is the point I'm getting at.
Correct. The only thing I was able to see was the exteriors, yes.
Okay. You made note on your surveillance log of September 6th that you saw cameras on the exterior of Mr. Tellis's residence on September 6th, correct?
Yes,
However, you did not see those cameras on September 1st.
I did not.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Just briefly, Your Honor. I'm going to put back on the overhead what's been admitted at states 350. The area kind of above the light here by the garage, that's where there were no cameras, right, on the 1st?
Correct.
And they were later seen on the 6th?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's all I have, Your Honor.
I have, of course, indulgent. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down. You are excused from your subpoena. And the state may call their next witness.
State calls Christy Baxter.
This is number 26 for the prosecution.
Please watch your step. And if you remain standing, raise your right hand, face the clerk, please.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
It's Christy Baxter, Christy, C-H-R-I-S-T-I-E, Baxter, B-A-X-T-E-R.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Ms. Baxter, how are you employed?
I'm employed as a crime scene analyst supervisor with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
How long have you worked as a crime scene analyst?
A little over 7 years,
And how long have you had the designation as a supervisor?
about 2 days.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
But you've worked as a crime scene analyst, I think you said for 7 years?
Yes,
And can you just briefly describe the training that you went through in order to work as a crime scene analyst?
as a crime scene analyst, we undergo about a 3 to 4 month process where we go through the academy, where you learn all the basics to be able to be successful throughout field training. And then you go through a 3 to 4 month process in field training where you're supervised by a senior crime scene analyst. And then at the end, you take a competency test where you have to pass to be able to go on and do actual field work by yourself. And then you continue training throughout your career to make sure you're up to date.
Okay. Now, we've had some testimony before this jury about the crime scene of 7216 Bronze Circle. So we won't go into that in too much detail, but did you report as well as one of the crime scene analysts to Jeff Gehrman's residence on September the 3rd of 2022?
Yes, ma'am.
And you worked with Claire Browning and other crime scene analysts and detectives to process that scene?
I did.
What was your responsibility in terms of the scene?
For this scene, my responsibility was impounding all evidence and doing the scans to complete a diagram.
Okay, and we've seen the diagram, but in terms of what you impounded, were they swabs of like possible DNA off like rocks and bushes and that sort of thing?
Yes, we took the rocks as an original surface with apparent blood. We took additional swabs of apparent blood and then DNA swabs of other surfaces as well.
Okay, and all of that was impounded by you?
Yes, ma'am.
When you were at that original scene at Bronze Circle, was Detective Derek Jappy present?
Not at the scene, no.
No. I want to kind of fast forward a little bit to September the 8th. Were you called upon to assist homicide on that date?
I was.
And that was still with regard to Mr. Gehrman's murder?
Yes, ma'am.
Where were you asked to meet homicide on September the 8th?
I was asked to go to the PA's office, which was 515 Shadow Lane.
And by the PA's office, do you mean the public administrator's office?
Yes, ma'am.
When you got there, did you see detectives that you knew?
Yes, we all met up.
Okay, and there would be homicide detectives present?
Yes.
Did you see Detective Jappy on the 8th?
Yes, I did.
And was he doing something separate than homicide? Were you there at homicide's request or his request?
I was there at homicide's request.
Did he appear to be taking his own pictures and doing his own sort of look through the PA's office?
Yes, he was.
So it was separate from what homicide was doing?
Yes.
Were you primarily working with Detective Gaddis?
Yes, she was primary on the investigation.
Okay. Was one of your responsibilities on the 8th to take photographs of the offices at the public administrator's office?
It was.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Ms. Baxter, I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 204 to 213. Just to ask you to look through those and let me know when you're done.
Okay.
Having looked through those, do you recognize those to be the photographs you took at the PA's office on the 8th of September?
They were.
Okay. State moves to admit 204 to 213, Your Honor.
We have no objection.
And may I publish them? Okay, thank you. I'm going to put on the overhead what's been admitted as states 204. Let me back it up just a little. Do you recognize that photograph?
I do.
And what are we looking at there?
That's the outside of the public administrator and public guardian office.
Okay. And this is states 205. What's that a photograph of?
That's the exterior of the office that was labeled Rob.
Okay. And did you and the detectives eventually went into that office?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm putting on the overhead states 207. Is that in the office?
That is.
And can you kind of orient us just a little bit, like where, from the prior photograph, is this looking to where the front door of the office is?
So I would be standing behind the desk within the office, shooting towards the door.
Okay. And this is states 208. Obviously the desk.
Yes.
So sort of the opposite view of the photograph we just saw.
That's correct.
And I'm putting on the overhead now what's been admitted as states 209. That's the view of the entry into the office?
Yes, from standing at the doorway.
Okay. There appears to be a computer on the desk there. Is that fair?
Yes.
Do you know what happened to that computer?
Homicide detectives collected it.
Okay. And I'm going to just show you one more close picture. This is states 212. Does that appear to be the computer that homicide collected?
Yes, I believe it's like behind or, and those are the monitors, so it's connected to the computer they collected.
Okay. And so they would have impounded that.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I will pass the witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Baxter, fair to say that you were called upon to fulfill your duties as a crime scene investigator to collect evidence concerning a murder case, correct?
Yes.
You testified that when you were at the public administrator's office on September 8th of 2022 that you saw Mr. Jappy, correct?
I did.
You had testified that you were called upon by the homicide office to be there, correct? Or the
That's
homicide
correct.
detail?
Homicide detectives, yes.
And your job primarily concerned with taking of photos and collecting evidence, correct?
Yes.
Generally, when you work with homicide, that's what you're called to do. You come and you document the evidence, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you had testified that when you arrived that that Detective Jappy was there, correct?
He was.
And you had testified that he was taking his own photos
He was.
and collecting his own evidence.
I'm not sure if he collected evidence, but I do know he took photographs.
Okay, but you had testified on direct collecting evidence. I mean, he was there doing his own thing, correct?
Yes, he was doing his own thing to take photographs, collect evidence. I'm not exactly sure what he collected, if he did any.
So he was not part of your team at the direction of the homicide unit, correct?
Right.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Any regret?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step down and you're excused from your subpoena. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
And the state may call their next witness.
State's gonna call Matt Havana to the stand. Sorry. Matt, like, opening.
So, Ms. Carroll, he was there at the office of the public administrator. So he was investigating Mr. Tellis. He was also investigating the corruption in the public administrator's office that allegedly predated Mr. Tellis. Mr. Tellis had asked the police department to investigate that, and Detective Jappy was assigned to that. And that's how Mr. Jappy began investigating Mr. Tellis. So the idea that he was doing his own investigation actually makes sense in that context.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name for the record.
Matthew, Matthew, Hovanes, Hovanec.
May I proceed, Your Honor? Thank you very much. Sir, what do you do for a living?
I'm employed by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department.
And what section are you assigned to?
I'm the commission supervisor, one of the commission supervisors of the Digital Forensics Lab.
What are the responsibilities of the Digital Forensics Lab, sir?
We collect, process, and make reports on all digital data, whether that's phones, videos, computers, tablets, the like.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit about some of the training and experience you've had leading up to working in this division?
Sure. I've got over 1,000 hours of training relevant to digital forensics from IASIS, which is the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists. I have my CFC, which is Certified Forensic Computer Examiner. I also have a CMDE, which is Certified Mobile Device Examiner. For some of the vendor-specific training that we use with Cellebrite, I have a CCO and CCPA certification, also drone certified through Cellebrite. With Magnet, I have a MCFE, Magnet Certified Forensic Examiner, and a CMGE. I also have training in cell phone repair and video training.
Okay. Did you assist Metro and specifically the homicide section led by Justine Gaddis in an investigation regarding the death of Jeffrey Gehrman?
I did.
Were there a series of devices that you were responsible for forensically downloading?
There were.
Did that include a phone that belonged to Robert Tellis?
Yes.
Do you remember what type of phone that was?
I believe it was a Google Pixel 6.
Okay. Did you also assist in forensically downloading a phone belonging to Jeffrey Gehrman?
I do not believe I did that phone.
Okay. Let me ask you about this. Did you assist in forensically downloading a workplace computer belonging to Mr. Tellis?
I did.
And object as the foundation as to who it belonged to, so I objected that characterization.
Okay, can you lay a foundation?
Sure. We'll start this way. Did you forensically download a desktop?
I did.
Okay. Did you review any materials or documents to learn where that desktop came from?
I did.
Okay. What sort of materials did you review?
User accounts, where the computer was collected from.
Okay. Did you ever have any time to consult also with Detective Justine Gaddis about materials that were collected by her homicide team?
Yes.
Okay. So let me ask you the question again. There was a desktop that you forensically downloaded, correct?
Yes.
Who did it belong to?
Robert Tellis.
Okay, and where did it come from?
From the Clark County, I can't remember the exact
Public
title of the
Administrator's
office. Public
Office?
Administrator's Office, yes.
Okay, thank you. Sir, if you could, just explain to the jury, what does it mean to forensically download something?
So when we forensically download something, we get the device in the state it is and try to make absolutely no changes to it. We want the device to be in the same state it was when we retrieved that device or when we were given that device. So when we download a phone or download a computer, we're using software and hardware that makes no changes to that device.
Okay. Are you familiar with a program called Celebrite?
I am.
What is Celebrite?
Celebrite is a company that manufactures software and hardware for downloading phones, computers and phones.
Was Celebrite utilized in the forensic download of Robert Tellis's Google Pixel phone?
Yes.
All right. I want to ask you, with respect to Mr. Tellis's workplace desktop computer, what program was used to forensically download that?
For that, it was Magnet Axiom.
Okay. How does that operate? Similar to Celebrite, different?
It's similar to Celebrite. A program's used to create an image, and then Magnet, the Axiom program, is used to process that image and create reports.
Okay, so we're talking about reports. Are they sometimes referred to as an extraction report?
Yes.
Okay, what is an extraction report?
There's different types of reports that can be created by each program. It's something that allows the end user, in this case, detectives going over the case or attorneys, to look at that data that I've processed in a viewable format, tag items, create reports from it.
Okay. When you look at one of these, so for example, if there's certain information in a phone that's identified as potentially relevant or connected some way, you can identify it, and then this report will spit it out in some sort of format. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay. So for example, will the extraction report have information about potentially when, let's just use a photo, for example. Let's say you find a photo that it is marked and it's extract. Will it have information potentially relating to either when it's created or maybe when it's appearing on the phone, something along those lines?
It is possible.
Okay. Will it include potentially locations, like a pathway about where it might be found within a device?
Yes.
Potentially, let's say if the image has, like maybe there's metadata about GPS coordinates, could sometimes that be attached to an image or some sort of device?
It can be.
Okay, it just depends, correct?
Yes.
Have you reviewed a series of extraction reports related to information contained inside Mr. Tellis's phone?
Yes.
All right. I'd like to, let's see, I'm going to show, give me 1 second. I'm going to start at least by showing opposing counsel what's been marked as 357A, 356, 361, 357, 360, 358, 363, no, it's okay, don't worry about it, and 364.
I reviewed these.
Any objections?
No objection.
Recommended by stipulation.
And just for just the court have a record of those exhibits? Okay. I'm gonna come up and show you those exhibits. Got a digital version of them as well, but let's just at least take a look at these real quick and let me know if you're familiar with what you're looking at there.
Yes, I'm familiar with these.
Okay. And you've seen digital versions of this as well, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Are these extraction reports derived from Mr. Tellis's Google Pixel phone?
Yes.
All right. I'm also at this time going to ask for the admission of stage proposed 354, which is essentially a digital equivalent of that same information.
No objection.
It's admitted.
Okay. This time we are going to publish 354. Could? Yeah, we could just queue over. I've got to move it over. It's okay. I got it. Here we go. Okay, opening the file, it says Telus phone. Let's open the file that says phone evidence campaign photo. So, let's close this up. So this is an example of an extraction report, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And let me just zoom in here for a second. So we have this thing that says path. What is that?
That's the file path that this specific artifact was located at.
All right. And when you look at that, can you tell roughly where in the phone that's coming from?
I can tell what application it was derived from.
Okay, so tell us what application it was derived from.
From Google Photos.
From Google Photos. What is it? What do you see there in that extraction pathway that tells you that?
The google.android.apps.photos.
Okay. We look over to the right. There's in that second big column, it indicates the word modified. What does that mean?
So being that this is a cached file, that's the last time that the phone interacted with that specific file.
Okay. And sometimes that can, for example, in some instances, you may have like a created on date. Would that be correct?
Correct.
So if you could tell, if the phone, the extraction could show, like, we know definitively that that phone created that particular, it might say created or something along those lines. Is that right?
You'd usually have something like created data or more metadata.
Okay. But at the end of the day, what does the word cache mean, by the way? How does that work in relation to phones?
Cache is phones use it, computers use it. It's temporary storage. When, say, use an application, visit a website, data, files, scripts, media, pictures can be stored in the cache to assist those applications or, say, a website in loading information faster so that it's not always going back to the source to download it. It tries to make the application run smoother, run faster for the user.
Okay. And so we have here, there's a couple of thumbnails over here, so those are kind of small images of that, correct?
Correct.
And we can see, this thumbnail, the Reelect Rob, tell us what is the date that it was modified or last modification date on there?
That'd be April 5th of 2022.
Okay, and this first image, when is that modified?
July 24th, 2022.
Okay. Close that out. And then there are associated in this folder, we have a full image, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to generate an extraction report regarding items searched items within Mr. Tellis's phone?
Sorry, could you say that once more?
Was there an extraction report generated for searched items, certain searched items within Mr. Tellis's phone?
Yes.
Okay. What does the searched items category mean in relation to Celebrate?
So in this instance, it was using the Google Chrome app, and it was something that would have been searched on there.
So you would kind of type those words into your phone, and then it would spit out potentially a result or create a record. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So when we look at this one, how many times was this tagged?
There's 25 tags.
Okay. And so when we look at what is the timestamp of the first one?
6:43:54 p.m. on
And- Go ahead.
on June 21st, 2022.
So you tricked me. You went time first, and I was kind of thrown off there. I wanted the date more importantly, but thank you very much. So on 6/21/22, someone typed into the phone, what's this category that says value? Why is that? What does that mean?
That's the value that was typed in.
Okay, and then when we look at source, again, is this kind of like the pathway?
Yes.
And where is it telling you these words, Jeff Gehrman, Las Vegas? Where is that popping up in this particular phone?
I'm not sure I understand that question.
Well, is this a pathway here? Is it telling you what application was being used when those words were typed?
Yes, the source is telling you what application was in use.
So what is the application?
That'd be Chrome.
Chrome. What is Chrome?
Chrome is a web browser.
Okay, is that like Safari if you have an Apple?
Yes.
Okay. So just scrolling down, are we seeing the same term being used, same terms being used?
That is correct.
Does it appear that all of these dates are June 21st of 2022?
It does.
Looking at entry number 17, what's the value in terms being used now?
In value, it's Jeff Gehrman, Las Vegas with Rob 4 in V in parentheses.
Okay.
Or sorry, quotations.
Was there an extraction report regarding web history?
Yes.
What is web history in terms of this program?
Web history of this program can look again at the browsers you're using and what exactly you're doing with that browser, what websites you're visiting.
Okay, so you can kind of see, again, someone may type in terms and you can see if they're visiting a particular website. Is that
Yes.
correct? How many tags are there here?
18.
Okay. What was the title? What were the words being typed into Google search?
Jeff Gehrman, Las Vegas,
And what was the date?
6/21/22,
At what time?
6:43:54 p.m.
Does this appear to parallel the first entry under the searched items as well?
It does.
And can that happen? You can type, the program can pick up when you're typing in and consider it a searched item, but if it shows up in your web browser, it might also be captured under web history.
Yes, multiple artifacts can be found in multiple places.
Okay. And these are examples of all the time that those terms were searched. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, another area is photographs. We talked about photographs briefly. Were there a series of extractions brought up regarding images found on a phone?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Detective, are you familiar with the date in which Jeff Gehrman passed away?
I do not recall the specific date.
Okay. If I told you September 2nd of 2022, you wouldn't have a reason to disagree, is that correct?
No.
Okay. Now, I want to take a look at this extraction report. How many tags are there?
3.
Okay. And what is the pathway related to these images?
Again, it's from the google.android.apps.photos.
Okay. And so it's coming from like a photo library?
From Google Photos.
Okay, and a Google Photos in his phone.
It could be in his phone, could be in the cloud.
So that's when we take pictures and then it kind of flows up into the cloud, and it's stored up there.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. So what is the modified date on this image here?
8/19/2022 at 1:42:15 p.m.
Okay. How about the second entry? What is the modified date there?
8/19/2022 12:23:30 p.m.
Okay. And the third one?
8/19/2022 1:42:15 p.m.
Okay. And you mentioned that these also capture the actual images themselves. Is that right? When we do these reports?
Yes.
Publishing the first file. What color is that shoe on the right?
It appears to be gray.
Okay. What brand does it appear to be?
Nike?
Sir, when we look at
Y'all remember the jailhouse interview when Robert Tellis said, None of these items that they found in my house belong to me. They were all planted there. The crime took place on September 2nd. The items were found in his home, I believe, on the 6th or the 8th. I think the 8th, September 8th. On August 19th, 2022, Mr. Tellis has a picture in his phone that went up to the cloud. He took this picture, and there's that exact same shoe that was cut up under his couch when they searched his home. How does the defense deal with that?
At the sole of the shoe, is it purely white or does it appear to have a design somewhere in the middle here?
Appears there's a design.
What sort of design does it look like?
4 black squares.
Okay. And this image was found inside Mr. Tellis's phone.
Yes.
And the modified date on that was August 19th of 2022.
Yes.
Okay, so roughly, do my math correctly, 13 days before Mr. Garman's murder, 12 days if my math is off.
Sounds correct.
Okay. And then this image appears 3 different times.
That's correct.
One second. Was an extraction report produced using the term Alfred camera?
Yes.
Publishing that file. How many, what is timeline?
Timeline is just giving you a reference of how many different columns there are, basically, how many you've extracted or tagged.
And in Celebrite, if there's a timeline, does it kind of put events that occur in the phone in chronological order?
It does.
Okay. So there appears to be what? How many things pulled from the timeline?
7.
Okay. And there's a column here that says type, correct?
Yes.
And so it kind of tells you what type of data entry point is inside the phone. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay, so let's read out entry number 1. What is the type?
Installed applications.
So what does that mean?
Be when you downloaded an application from an app store.
Can you please tell me the date that this application was installed?
9/5/2022 at 12:03:53 a.m.
And if you could just help us, there's this parent parentheses that says UTC -7. What does that mean?
UTC is a time code, so right now we're in -7 during daylight savings time.
Okay, so we're talking time zones, is that right?
Yeah, universal coordinated time, and then every time zone goes off of that.
And we're Pacific, correct?
Yes.
And so to get to Pacific, you'd have to subtract 7 hours?
Yes.
And is that what the program is indicating, that this has been converted to Pacific time?
Yes.
All right. If you could, so it says timestamp, it reads that date. Read what it says right here.
Purchase date?
Okay, and then what's the description of what application was purchased?
The Alfred Camera Home Security app.
Okay, so this application was installed by someone 3 days after Mr. Garman was killed.
Correct.
All right. Let's go to the next entry. What is entry number 2 about?
Web history.
All right. And give us the date and time.
9/5/2022, 12:10:46 a.m.
So because this is timeline, it's kind of merging different sources of information, correct?
Yes.
Like before, we had a report that just looked at web history, but timeline can pull from different spaces, right?
Correct.
So for example, if there was an image that might relate to this, it would also migrate into this report. Would that be correct?
That's possible.
All right. So if you could, it's indicate, what's the term that's being used right there?
It's the last visited time.
What does that mean?
When somebody last visited that website.
All right. So at 12:10 a.m., what is the user of this phone visiting?
The Alfred Web Viewer PC is home security monitor using Google Chrome.
Okay, and we find, is there a second entry mirroring all of that same information?
Yes,
Look at entry number 4, how about then?
same information.
But is the date a little bit different?
The time is different, yes.
Okay, we have other similar entries, is that correct, on the 5th?
That is correct.
Okay. Was there information, an extraction report also, apologize, was there also an extraction report derived from images that appeared to come from Google Maps?
Yes.
Okay. So, let's first pull up the extraction report. How many images relating to Google Map images were tagged for this report?
132.
So that signifies that there was 132 images found in his phone related to this particular topic?
That were tagged, yes.
Okay. Let's start scrolling through some of this. For example, with this first one here, can you tell us, when you look at the pathway, where are these images coming from?
From the Google Maps app,
So they're coming from the Google Maps app,
yes.
all right? What's the modification date on this?
Again, that would be the last time that that application interacted with that specific artifact.
Please read out the date for entry number 1,
8/12/2022, 9:55:24 p.m.
okay? Let's look at this second one. What is there, it's off by a couple of different seconds, correct?
Yes,
But all the information remains the same?
yes,
Does 8/12/22 appear to be the same date for these items?
it does.
Let's just. All the way down to the end, all from 8/12, is that correct?
Correct?
So, let's open up a folder that says 7216 Bronze Circle. You recognize what you're looking at here?
A home?
It's a home. Is it in a certain type of web program?
This would be in Google Street View, yes, so Google Maps.
Okay. And so at this particular home, this is kind of an angle. This would be if someone was in Google Maps and pulled up a street view of 7216 Bronze Circle. Is that correct?
Yes,
Is it just another angle of
Yes.
that same home?
yes.
Let's start getting to the actual images. So this is one of the images that was found inside Mr. Tellis's phone. Would this correspond to one of the thumbnails?
Yes,
How about this one?
yes. Yes, yes. Yes, 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 yes. 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 Yes.
Pulling up 7212 Bronze Circle. What are we looking at in this image?
Another street view of a house.
Okay. Is this image pulled out of Mr. Tellis's phone?
Yes.
And again, the dates on these were August 12th of 2022.
Yes.
So that's roughly, my math is usually terrible, about 20 days before Mr. Gehrman is killed. If it's September 2nd. Am I doing that math right? I feel like I am.
It sounds close.
Sounds close? Okay. In this photograph, what does that appear to be? Right above the street address on the house?
Appears to be a solar-powered security camera.
And that was inside Mr. Tellis's phone.
The image, yes.
Are these images that came out of this extraction?
Yes. 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 Yes.
What are we looking at here? This is another street view
It is.
of this street called Bronze Circle.
It is.
Are these following images that were pulled out of Mr. Tellis's phone?
They are.
And there's a series of folders here that identify different houses on this street. Would that be correct?
Correct.
Okay. But ultimately, when you put them all together, it totals. How many does it total again, based on this?
132.
With a date of August 12th of 2022.
Correct.
Was there also images, an extraction report created regarding what appeared to be, I apologize, I need to move this over, what appeared to be almost like surveillance,
There was.
publishing that report? How many tags are related here?
101.
If you could, please tell me the pathway where these images come from.
The google.android.apps.photos cache.
So it's coming from, again, the photo application inside Mr. Tellis's phone?
That or Google Photo Cloud, one of.
Okay, or it was up in the cloud associated, but that phone, that particular phone belonging to Mr. Tellis is associated with that cloud, correct?
Yes.
Okay. What's the modification date on this?
8/15/2022, 10/24:07 a.m.
So 3 days after the 132 images found of Bronze Circle.
That's correct.
And this is a rough look of what all of these images look like, correct?
Correct.
What appears to be captured in these photographs?
Vehicles driving down a street.
And they all appear to be from 8/15 of 2022, correct?
They do.
So a total of 101, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, we don't have all 101, but we will, I want to ask you, do these appear to be some of the images that appear inside this phone related to this extraction report?
They do.
Was there also an extraction report created relating to images that appeared to have information related to Jeffrey Gehrman?
There was
How many tags were there?
7.
Why don't you tell us again about the pathway? Where did these images come from?
From the Google Photos app.
So the same application that had kind of like this, the pictures of the cars driving by, same place.
Yes.
In the same place where all the bronze circle pictures are taken, correct?
Yes.
Okay, those came from the 12th and the 15th. Tell us about this date. When do these images, when are these at least show up as being modified?
8/23/2022.
Okay, so just a couple of days later, correct?
Correct.
And every one of these 7 images is from that date, correct?
Correct.
If you could, please read me the name that is under registrants,
Jeffrey M. Gehrman.
okay? I'd like to go 2 notches down. Please read the registrant and the address.
Jeffrey M. Gehrman, 7216 Bronze Circle, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89128, I believe.
Okay, can you tell me what is this, read the top line up here, what does that say?
2021 Honda Civic Sport.
It provides a VIN number as well, is that right?
It does?
Okay, it provides the body style, is that right?
It does?
And when we look at this, can you look at the bottom and read the words of what that says right there?
Dell.
Okay, you're familiar with computers, correct?
Correct?
Does that appear to be a monitor?
It does?
A monitor that might be sitting on a desk, potentially?
Potentially?
Okay. This came out of Mr. Tellis's phone,
Yes,
and the date of the modification on this is August 23rd. Is that right?
that's correct.
And that would be roughly 8 or 9 days. I just can't remember if August have 31 days. I feel like August is 31 days. And if that's the case, then that would be 9 days before Mr. Gehrman was killed.
Correct.
Okay. So this image comes out of Mr. Tellis's phone. 31 days. I don't have that map. It's good. Okay. Did this image come out of Mr. Tellis's phone?
It did?
Please, what are the names that we keep seeing appearing in here?
Jeffrey M. Gehrman.
Okay, and it's listing what? What's it kind of showing? Different what?
Different cars.
Okay. Again, do we see the Dell thing again?
Yes.
Okay. Next image, is this another angle of it? Another angle of like another image?
Yes.
Okay, it appears to come from a monitor, from a computer.
Yes.
Is it more information about Gehrman and Hondas?
It is?
I guess there's another one down here, a 2003 what?
2003 Volkswagen Passat GL.
Right? What are we looking at here? This is another image that came from the phone.
It is?
And again, it has similar information that we saw from one of the other images.
Correct.
Again, this comes out of Mr. Tellis's phone.
It does.
And let's look at this one. What's this say up here?
Jeffrey M. Gehrman.
Okay, does it provide a date of birth for Mr. Gehrman?
It does?
What is the date of birth of Mr. Gehrman?
8/23/1953, 69 years old.
All right. Does it
Again,
also
Mr.
provide
Gehrman's
a bronze
age
circle
is
address
one of the
as
elements
well
of one of the
for Mr.
crimes
Gehrman?
It does.
in this case. They've just proved it again.
So the date on that is 8/23. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you also did a download of Mr. Tellis's work computer, correct?
Correct.
A computer that was found in his office, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you produce a series of reports similar to an extraction report in relation to that?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to open up the first file here that's entitled Chrome Autofill 07 216 bronze. Is this kind of the cover page for your report, sir?
For a PDF report, yes.
Okay. So, this indicates Chrome autofill record 1, is that right?
That's correct.
Tell me, what's the significance of the category name?
When something's typed in, such as an address into Google, it might think you want to store that as an autofill to make it easier to populate when you're typing something in the future.
What's the date on that?
That is 8/23/2022 at 6:05:40 p.m.
Okay, so that's the same date that we had those, that we looked at before, right?
Yes,
So the ones that had like the car registration information that appear to be on a monitor, computer monitor, we've got the same, at least the same date as those images, correct?
that's correct.
Can you please read to me what value was entered in at that point?
7216 bronze.
That's the same street associated with Mr. Gehrman on those images from 823, is that right?
That's correct.
Is that the same street name as all of those Google mapped images that we saw?
Correct.
Let's open the file that says Chrome logins, RE Telus. Now, read to me username. What's it say?
The username is rtellis at Clark County.
Okay, what's the created date and time on that?
8/23/2022 at 6:04:56 p.m.
All right. And what is IDI core? Do you know what that is?
I do not know
Okay.
what IDI core is.
But essentially, just to be clear, the last thing that we looked at also tied into IDI core, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so all this comes from the IDI core program, right?
Correct.
And whoever punched in their username put in rtellis at Clark County,
Yes.
okay, on 8/23 of 2022.
Yes.
Now I'm opening a file that says Chrome Web History Expanded Person Search. Can you tell me what's the date and time on this one?
8/23/2022, 6:05:41 p.m.
And read to me the URL or the website that was being visited.
It's www.idicore.com/search/expanded person search.
And there's a visit count. How many times is that visited?
7.
And again, this is all from the same date as we saw those other images that appear to come from a desktop monitor.
Correct.
Court's indulgent. I have no further questions for this witness.
What does this guy do with all that information? He just got all that information in front of the jury. What does the defense attorney ask?
Afternoon.
How are we going to plant doubt now?
In reference to the report that you generated, which is State's Exhibit 354, we'll start with the questions concerning the extractions in reference to the cell phone. Do you call that line of questioning? There are a number of times that you were asked by the state the cell phone, and you pretty much every time responded the iCloud, correct? These images that you can testify to were derived or extracted from the iCloud.
No, iCloud would be for an Apple phone. This was a Google phone.
Okay, so
just
it would be
the
a cloud, the
Yes.
cloud, Google Cloud. I mean,
Yes.
are you aware of how many devices, communication devices, had access to this cloud?
I am not.
So it could be 1, it could be 20, you're not able to give an opinion or testimony in reference to the number of cell phones, correct?
With access to that cloud account, no.
You have
So his
had
wife did it.
experience, in your employee dealing with clouds that are hacked?
Personally, no.
Personally, but you've been, but you're aware of investigations wherein a person's cloud is hacked.
Yes.
In fact, we hear about it, don't we? Oftentimes, oh, my cloud was hacked.
We do.
You were not called upon to conduct an investigation concerning the hacking of this cloud, correct?
No.
You were asked questions concerning an application in reference to security cameras. Do you remember that line of questioning?
Correct.
And it appeared that there was an app downloaded, whether to the phone. Can you testify concerning that? Was that downloaded to the phone or to the cloud?
It was downloaded to the phone.
So we're able to pinpoint the security application being downloaded to that phone, correct?
Correct.
The Pixel phone.
Correct.
And you were asked a date, and that date was on September 5th, 2022, correct?
That sounds correct.
And this app that was downloaded was concerning security cameras.
That's what it sounds like.
Fairly common. One can download a security camera app in order to monitor their security cameras.
It is.
You'll agree with me that generally people download or purchase a security camera and download an application concerning that security camera if there's a concern in reference to their security.
Yes.
You were asked questions in relation to the date that Mr. Gehrman passed, and you were told, hey, if it's September 2nd, 2022, would you have any reason to disagree with me? Call that question.
Yes.
Obviously, this case concerns the passing, the killing of Mr. Gehrman, correct?
Correct.
Fair to say that a person downloads a security app in reference to a security system in order to protect themselves and their property.
Correct.
Objection, cost respect.
Obviously, the point being that hey, if a person's concerned about their security, someone that they may know has been killed, it would be reasonable to assume they would get a security camera and download an app in order to access that security camera from their phone.
Could be.
In reference to the Dell, the desktop, the last part of your questionings concerning various downloads in reference to Mr. Gehrman from the office laptop. Remember that line of questioning?
The office computer, yes.
Correct. Based upon your testimony, those images were downloaded after 6 p.m., correct?
Those images were still in UTC time. The one on the screen shows right now they haven't been converted for Pacific Standard Time yet.
After 5 o'clock.
No, that website, if you do the time conversion, would be 11:05:41 a.m. on the 23rd.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Redirect?
Yes. Detective, there were some questions about.
Real quick. So probably the best thing he got out of that was relaying to the jury that it's reasonable for somebody to get a security cam outside their home when someone that they know has been killed directly outside their home. It's probably the best thing he got out of there. This other stuff about, well, do you know how many devices are connected to that cloud account? Well, so are you saying that his wife or one of his kids who are also likely on the same cloud account that they took these pictures? Maybe hackers did it. Hackers, a month, several weeks before this guy was killed, hackers went into his phone and his work computer and put these images on there. That doesn't really make much sense.
Hacking. Did you see, when you reviewed the phone, did you find any evidence that this phone download was corrupted in any way?
No.
Did anybody from Metro Homicide provide you any information to suggest that this phone had been hacked into?
No.
There was questions about it's reasonable to assume. I think the question related something along the lines of, if someone had been murdered, it might be reasonable to assume someone might download a security camera to potentially protect themselves. Do you remember being asked something like that?
I do.
Under that same line, possibly if someone actually had committed the killing, would it be reasonable to assume you might want to put security cameras up to see if people...
As a speculation. Thank you.
Okay. The time that we can see up on the screen, 6.
It doesn't matter. The jury heard the question and they've already made their own opinion in their mind with respect to the answer.
05 on 8/23/2022. When you convert that to UTC time, what does that actually come out to?
Again, it's 8/23/2022 at 11:05:41 a.m.
Showing opposing counsel, which is marked as no objection. Permission to publish 351.
Okay, it's admitted by stipulation at this
Correct,
time,
yes.
and you may publish.
Could you just cue over for 1 second? So, we. August 22nd fell on a what?
August 22nd fell on a Monday.
And you said the time was what time when you converted to UTC time?
I believe it was 11, well, when I converted to Pacific Standard Time, it was 11:05 and was it 41 seconds?
So at 11:05 on a Monday, someone went into Mr. Tellis's work computer and started looking up things like 7216 Bronze Circle.
Correct.
I have no further questions for this witness.
No recess.
Thank you very much for your testimony here today. You may step.
Just so you guys understand the import of what he's saying, okay, so in the middle of a business day, when there's a whole bunch of people likely in the office of the public administrator, somebody accessed Robert Tellis's computer in his office with Robert Tellis's ID number, and therefore knowing Robert Tellis's password. Nobody in the office said anybody was in there that shouldn't have been in there. It stands to reason that it was Robert Tellis who entered his username and his password into the system that day.
Step down and you are excused from your subpoena. Do you have the next witness waiting?
May we approach?
Sure.
I'm going to try to fast forward it a little bit through this sidebar.
Including your fellow jurors in a way regarding the case.
All right, they're going on break. I'll try to fast forward through
Email,
the
text,
break.
internet, or other means of communication or social media.
All right, they're on lunch break, so that means it's break time for us as well. They did get started a little late, but the jury still got to eat. So we will pick back up at 4:30 today. I hope that you all join me right back here. Again, for those of you who weren't here at the beginning, I am going to get started a little late tomorrow because I have some attorney work to do instead of YouTube stuff. So I do hope that you all will join me tomorrow. I will repeat that announcement this afternoon. And again, we'll be back here at 4:30 this afternoon. I will throw up the link. Thank you all for coming. For now, my name is Nathan Saunders, and this is The Legal Good.